So where do you see the future of journalism going in relation to traditional media and like the Australian with newspapers and mainstream media in broadcast as well?
I think Trump has actually been a positive for traditional media. So serious newspapers like the New York Times and the Australian have had very large increases in readership driven by Trump. So traditional media tends to be a beneficiary of Trump's war on journalism. Interestingly, a lot of people who aren't sure go to traditional media to try to find out. Because people are quite intelligent, they tend to make their own decisions. In my view, Trump did have a point. I think the traditional kind of New York Times alignment with Hillary Clinton was problematic. The establishment media, particularly in New York and in California, was pretty happy to just go along with the idea from the Clintonites that anybody who supported Trump was a despicable. They didn't really look hard at whether, they were in fact traditional Democrat voters who had been the losers after 3 or 4 decades of globalisation. I actually forecast that Trump would win. I wrote it the day before in my column. Now, only because, there were too many votes for Hillary wasted in the big states, the big Democrat states like California and New York. It seems to me that the future for, much the same as I've been saying earlier, the future for media is strong if media know what their core values are. If I look at the Oz has probably lost about 30% of its print sales. The Herald's lost 60% of its. So at its peak, the Oz sold about 130, now it's selling about 100. But it's also got nearly 100,000 digital subscribers. So at its peak, it sold 130,000 print newspapers, and it's now selling 200,000 print and digital subscriptions. So by any sort of reasonable analysis, the Australian has actually done very well as far as readers and subscribers go, despite people singing to death the future of newspapers and the future of journalism. Now, of course, the Australian's in a very niche market. It's a high-end market for people who want a lot of information. The readers tend to be highly educated and high-income earners. A lot of them have power in the bureaucracy, power in the university sector, power in politics. So it's a very different kind of readership, say, from the readership thing, nationally or internationally. So there is no real geographical boundary. Anyone can go on to news.com or smh.com and can go on to the newyorktimes.com. But what they can't get from those sites is the best and most important news in Brisbane. And because the Courier Mail has 150 journalists in Brisbane, that's what they should be focusing on. They should be focusing on making sure nobody in that town breaks more stories about that town than the Courier does. Now, unfortunately, the papers have all chased the wrong goal. They've tried to put paywalls up for news that is ubiquitous and won't sell. People won't pay for a lot of the news on the SMH and Age websites or BrisbaneTimes.com because it's the same as the news they can get for free on news.com.au or Yahoo News. So my view would be when people figure it all out and they start to realise what their own core comparative advantage is in their town, things will start to improve again. But if I look at the signs overseas, I think there are signs in the Times in London and the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal that newspapers are having a bit of a renaissance. So I think that will happen here too. I think some will die. It's quite possible the Fairfax papers will die. But, papers with a pretty clear understanding of their own mission statement, like the Fin Review or the Oz, I think have a very strong future.